1798 is an infamous year for Irish Republicans. It's the year that the Battle at Vinegar Hill took place over in Ireland.
Could I have 3 pints of Guinness, please?
Thousands of Irish rebels gathered on the hillside, most armed with nothing more than a steel pike to take on the might of the British Army. A massacre ensued, and those who survived were exiled to the other side of the world.
So, from about the year 1800, the little colony of New South Wales started to fill up with Irish convicts who didn't think of themselves as convicts. They saw themselves as political prisoners, and they loathed the British. And as soon as they got here, they started to organise an uprising.
6 times in 2 years they tried, and each time they failed. Often it was an informant who gave the game away in exchange for a measure of rum. But not everyone could be bought. Here's an eyewitness account of an attempt to get information from 16-year-old Paddy Galvin.
He was ordered to get 300 lashes. He got 100 on the back, and you could see his backbone between the shoulder blades. Then the doctor ordered him to get another 100 on his bottom. He got it, and then his haunches were in such a jelly that the doctor ordered him to be flogged on the calves of his legs. He got 100 there, and as much as a whimper, he never gave. They asked him if he would tell where the pikes were hid. He said he didn't know and wouldn't tell. "You may as well hang me now," he said, "for you'll never get any music from me." They put him in the cart and took him to the hospital.
By March 1804, they were ready to try again. Most were Irish, but many English convicts also swore allegiance to the cause. In Philip Cunningham, they had a leader who knew how to organise troops and rally a force. This time, they'd managed to keep the plot a secret. So when 200 of them escaped from Castle Hill, it caught the Redcoats completely by surprise. Major Johnson, leader of the Redcoats, marched 29 soldiers through the night from Sydney. By dawn, they'd caught up with the rebels on a hill outside Parramatta. The army was outnumbered almost 10 to 1.
When the Redcoats and the rebels finally met up, there was a big standoff. Would you mind being our Redcoats?
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry to disturb you when you're working. You just line up there, OK? You're Major Johnson, who was the leader of the Redcoats, right? And guys, would you be the rebels for us? OK, you're Philip Cunningham, who was the leader of the rebels, and you're going, "Calm down, everybody, calm down, calm down." And Cunningham, you're going, "Death or liberty," and you're going, "I want a boat back home, I want a boat back home." And the tension is absolutely, you could cut it with a knife, except that it's a trick as far as Johnson's concerned, because he just sneaks a gun out of his pocket and he points it at one of the rebels, and at the same moment, one of his men points his gun at Cunningham, and I don't know what happens next, except it all kicks off, and suddenly they're all firing at each other. Fire at him! You're firing at him. Oh, God. This is a lovely little caricature of what took place that day at Vinegar Hill. That's one of the rebels shouting, "Death or liberty," and this is Johnson shouting, "You scoundrel, I'll liberate you." 9 rebels were killed, a lot more were injured, including Cunningham, although everybody thought he was dead because he'd been run through by a sword, and the rebels thought, "We've lost our leader," and ran away. But in fact, Cunningham was still alive, and the Redcoats dragged him off to the government store, and next day they hanged him from the staircase of the store without trial. And they hanged an awful lot of the rest of the rebels, and they just left them dangling there as a gruesome reminder of what death or liberty really meant. What do you think Johnson would think if he knew he'd been buried in the same graveyard as a lot of revolting Catholics?
I think Major Johnson would be spinning in his grave if he had any idea that this was the outcome.
Was everyone who was involved in the uprising Irish?
No, about half of them were English, and they just sort of joined along in the general fun. Samuel Marsden, who was the person in charge of the trials, was absolutely horrified to discover that 4 of the 8 that were going to be hanged had to have their last rites, so to speak, from the Church of England rather than the Catholic faith. And he got around this by saying that his poor, wayward Protestant sheep had been drawn into this most unhappy affair by the wickedness of the Irish Catholics.
Why were the Irish so rebellious?
Well, they were people without many civil and human rights back in Ireland, which became worse when they were transported here, because Ireland was in such a state of constant turmoil at that period that they were tried with no record kept of their sentences. So they could have come for 7 years, 14 years or life. Now, when they learned that they were here forever, that's when they started to really step up their attempts to escape. And all they ever wanted to do was get away, get on a ship and go home to Ireland.